The second week, Tuesday of December, had begun. This day would leave a big mark to the life of two teens who believed that they already gone through it all. Today, their future would be rewritten for the rest of their life. Theodore woke up with his usual early bird style and moved to his house's kitchen, much to the boy's surprise, and behaved there if he wasn't anywhere to be seen. Theodore was actually a bit shaken by this chain of events. Was he just more silent than usual, or was something actually off? Theodore didn't know how much to do. He still kept his routines as usual, but after some time, Theodore was about to leave home. He decided to place his ear on Elvira's door and listen, was she actually asleep? It appeared so that she was, until Theodore heard sniffing and slight sobbing. It was like she was crying, while still being somewhat asleep. Theodore didn't want to intervene her mother's sleep, so he didn't pay attention to it anymore and kept going. He was about to leave for work, but then remembered his and mother's conversation for the last evening, and he couldn't help it and shed a tear. I'll be under good care, Elvira, he thought, and left for work. Theodore was still sorrowful by the events that occurred, but mourning over them were no use, so he tried to be positive. He felt a bit lighter when he remembered that the new work model of the workshop, which turned the days a lot more formulaic and calmer to the boy's mind. When he could only focus for the one step of production where he excelled at, it was easy to get into a better mood. He also remembered that Lucia would probably bring him to the marketplace of Claw Lake, a place which was completely unknown for the boy. And also, he could do a favor for Elvira that way. Everyone wins there. Theodore arrived to the workshop with his usual routine, 5:30. Roderick and Gustav were already there in their own places. Gustav behind his typewriter, and Roderick with his usual work suit and fulfilling the role he got. Surface treatment. Such as oiling all the prepared products his subjects had done. He used certain method rarely even considered as surface treatment due to its basic rules. Roderick spread the first layer of oil with large rag made out of fiber, but then he spread the second layer of oil with smooth sandpaper. Even the man himself acknowledged its contradictory nature, but it served its purpose. It made the oil layer look deeper because of the dust that crumbled to the wood because of the oil. The surface was left with rather an unbalanced layer, but it was all to be fixed with steel wool and a third layer of oil. No one else ever knew this method, but Roderick said that it was all just a secret technique only practiced by the dogs. Theodore, who always saw Roderick as his best teacher, he didn't dare to even question his master's techniques. He just nodded to everything he said and stayed blindly loyal. Much to the boy's surprise, Roderick and Gustav were the first person to speak during the morning. Faithful and diligent beginning of a man you are, Theodore. Remember when our village's elders made fun of Alvor's brothers that they weren't the most passionate and eager men from here, but they don't pretend to be, just like you. Gustav stated, and Roderick stopped his work for a moment and walked up to the two. Also, you are the only one besides us who is here at this hour. Tell me, when all the other workers arrive, I don't think they were really fair to them, and I'll sure to point that out today. Roderick continued and walked up to his apprentice so close that he could whisper something to his ear. Lucia will be here when her school is over. We talked about your idea during the evening, and I think there shouldn't be any problems to it. When the work hours are over, you two can go if you want. Also, take good care of her. But Roderick still kept going with a lot more trimmed down and quiet voice. In his language was also a huge amount of respect and faith that Theodore will and is capable for everything he expected. This mindset has been in Roderick's head for a while now, because Theodore always managed to surpass his expectations. Out of the boy's own will to prove himself that he indeed is worthy of his name. None of it had to do with Roderick, but his constantly rising bar certainly had an effect on the young Travers, and his view on the world around him. When Roderick told what he wanted, he kept going on with his work. Gustav hadn't yet left, and he looked like he wanted to apologize for something. He cleared up his throat and told the young Trevor standing against him. Forgive me if I hadn't yet given you any lessons, like you wished, from last week. I just had to spin papers around my table. That time wasn't simply on our side. Theodore realized that too. Gustav almost every day kept him some sort of a lecture about school subjects, but he hadn't done anything for some time. The boy kept going. It's all right, I believe. I would have missed much if I had been with you, but do you now have time for some education? Gustav's mustache raised to the roof when he heard that, and stated back. Of course, if you, my friend, wish so. Everything is prepared. Shall we start later today? After some time, all of the other workers of the workshop arrived to their places at their usual times. This was a bit disappointing for Roderick, and he made sure to speak about yesterday's events to them. Despite it all, Tuesday moved like a recently oiled machine, and after Monday had taught its lessons, and so everything felt like it has been perfected in practice. The reality wasn't yet perfect, but just the detail that mistakes were no longer made certainly raised the day's mood. Despite the good mood, the day went by, and everyone had to be disappointed when the clock closed at 4 p.m. But so, everyone decided to start their cleanup time and move on to their home. Theodore was a bit conflicted whether he should be eager or disappointed as well, about the day being already over, but he knew that Lucia would probably wait for him somewhere there. So he decided to get moving after the cleanup time. Theodore and all the other carpenters gathered their belongings and left the workshop. Much to Roderick's and Theodore's surprise, Lucia was nowhere to be seen. What this might mean? They didn't bother to wait and find out, and began their stroll back home. Roderick got an idea why Lucia wasn't, because when he and Theodore stepped out of the house, they saw that a new snowfall had begun a few hours before, and it had already created over 50 centimeters tall stack of snow. That would make walking harder and slower. Also, shovels were to be needed once again. Lucia was on her way to the workshop from school, but it wasn't quite in the time she expected. Because of the questionable condition of roads in the village, and the lack of sustainability made walking along them a challenge of their own. She made her way to home, but stopped there and started to gather her belongings that she might have needed today. When that was done, she considered to get back outside of her house and walk to the workshop. But when she took a look at the clock, she didn't see it as a necessary task anymore. She just had to wait her father and Theodore to arrive. During her wait, she couldn't help but feel pleased about the turn of events. Sure, the house's supplies went out completely, but still, they could use an addition. Also, the chance to bring her new friend there made it all more positive. Theodore and Rorik arrived about 15 minutes later to the Dark's villa, and Lucia welcomed them in. Because there wasn't questions anymore to be asked, so the young pair started their stroll right away. The road where walked along with tired legs felt like walking in glue, especially Theodore, him having to stand and walk around the whole day without any breaks. Despite his legs feeling like they'd say themselves out whenever they just wanted, he couldn't help but smile. While talking in the winter's darkness, Lucia couldn't left it unnoticed, and she even called it out. What it is that you find so appealing about this all? I've never seen you this bright. Theodore immediately snapped away from his state of calm when he heard Lucia's soft but asking tone of voice, and left out an unnoticeable gasp. I'm just living in my calmest moments of the day. Calmest? What makes this stroll in these circumstances the calmest? Yes, no pressure to perform, just walking along the road. That is all I care. Lucia was still a bit shocked by this sort of behavior by Theodore, but then she had gotten used to it for now. She was still interested in how she could finally get Theodore into a more comfortable circle. But this conversation reassured her that Theodore indeed didn't enjoy his life that much. He wanted a change. A good sign, Lucia thought in her head. Her thoughts were stopped when Theodore said that he had to pick something from home, while pointing at a hut next to the road. Lucia took a look at there, and she couldn't help but feel disappointed. Despite she didn't have any high expectations about the Trevor's household, and she had seen many small huts like this one, the fact that the person she admired had to live under such fate was depressing. When Lucia just kept waiting in the middle of the road, Theodore had marched to his home, grabbed a clapper bag. They weren't that aesthetic, but convenient to their size and endurance. Elvira was also in the house while baking a bread out of rye. Theodore walked up to her and told about his plans, and at least asked her opinion about it. Hey Mom, if you'd excuse me, I'd like to go to the markets today. After those words were said, Evie's gesture changed back from her primary numbers into the same as the last evening, ashamed and disappointed, as she had to hold a tear. Are you really sure about it? Without any guidance or knowledge over the place? And you decided to tell me about it just now? She tried to say while words in her mouth got tangled at each other. Theodore was quick to reassure his mother about the situation. He raised his arm to point the figure who could be spotted from the outside. I am not alone, and I know her. She is to be trusted. And also she's important to me, Theodore explained. Elvira almost jumped when she heard the word important. Oh, a girl there, important to you. Well, what do you do here anymore? She awaits you, Ellie stated while her mood immediately rised up. Theodore took his wallet to his pocket and left the house, while Evie was almost constantly 2 inches off the ground. Theodore stepped out from his house and greeted Lucia again. Lucy let out a chuckle when she saw Theodore's choice of equipment compared to hers one small bag made from leather. Theodore understood that laugh and played along. I know we poor people don't have it fancy. Instead, ours is practical. Lucia didn't realize that this was meant to be partially a joke, so she tried to get more serious and replied back, I know, but practical is better after all. She tried not to hurt Theodore's emotions. Her voice saw some nervousness in it, but the boy kindly assured her. Depends. Theodore replied while sounding a lot calmer than Lucia at the moment. After Lucia heard that, she realized that Theodore didn't feel anything bad for the inequality in wealth, so she thought it was best to move on. The two kept walking, and after about 2 kilometers, the sign of Claw Lake came across them. So this is what their coat of arms looks like. Is it supposed to be representative of the city or something? So this is what their coat of arms looks like. Is it supposed to represent something of the city? Theodore asked with certain curiosity. He had never seen. Theodore asked with certain curiosity. He had never seen any other villages or cities in the world, so this sign alone opened a big door for the world around and outside of his safe and predictable homeland. Claw Lake's coat of arms was a shield-shaped, and it had 2 boats on it, rowing away from each other, and below them was a fish swimming underneath the boats. The boats were colored green and purple, and the fish was golden. The shield itself was blue as lake water against the sunshine in the middle of a day. Indeed, it shows the most important livelihoods methods here. Almost everyone here happens to be a boat enthusiast or a fisher. Lucia replies back, now with more half-jokingly tone. Theodore didn't recognize this joke, but he thought that there wasn't anything bad about that. Such as everyone who owns land also takes care of it, the boy thought it, and replies back with a simple, all right. The buildings and lights of Claw Lake were about to be at the couple's site, and so was the city's positive atmosphere. Theodore was quick to make a comment about it. Those lights, do they come from the buildings, or from somewhere else? Lucia replied to this question fast. They come from the buildings and somewhere else. They come from light bulbs that are used outside. When their light meets the white snow, it reflects everything towards the sky. I quite like that effect. Theodore's curiosity immediately got grabbed from Lucia's explanation. Physics. Something Gustav hadn't yet thought him at all. Because Theodore thought that it was no use. But now, when he got a practical example of that, his opinion on the matter immediately changed. But now, it wasn't the best time for further questions. Lucia got the attention soon back where it should have been, where the two were going to the marketplace. She pointed with her finger there and said, "There you have it, the largest agricultural exhibition you can ever find from here. Everything you can just come up with exists here." Theodore was quite amused by Lucia's words, and let out a chuckle. It sounded overblown, but he didn't know what to expect, so he decided to see where this little adventure would bring him. So he remained silent, and not long, the marketplace's gates were in front of the pair. The couple walked past them, and the eventfulness of the evening began. As the two were standing in the middle of Claw Lake's marketplace, Theodore had already almost lost his sense of direction because of the amount of people and different blocks of products are all around him. All he could do is let Lucia lead him wherever they'd go. Her being the more familiar one with the setting and atmosphere, the first place Lucia led him was obvious the food markets, which held grains, vegetables, steaks, drinkables, and sweets. Because Theodore was not prepared for the best on the evening, nor did he investigate what his house might have needed to actually buy. This meant that he really couldn't do much other than just watch what was happening around him. Lucia knew everything she had to buy, and she was constantly on the move. Theodore ended up only buying some more exotic grains that he hadn't yet seen in his household, and carrots, both being something the Trevors didn't farm. Lucia, on the other hand, took everything she could have just gotten her hands on. When the two were just gotten out of the largest human mass, and some silence was around them, so they could finally hear each other. So, aren't you impressed by the scale of the market has? Or what about the happening here? Lucia asked from her friend, and she was eager to hear how she managed to entertain Theodore with this little trip. Something I didn't expect, but I was prepared for something small and quiet. Not this otherworldly and flashy and loud. But now that we still can hear each other, is it possible for us to do a quick run through the entire place? This indeed has caught my interest. Theodore answered. Lucia's smile cracked to its peak for a second when she heard the suggestion, and grabbed Theodore's hand and started to pull the boy around the marketplace. Theodore, despite his wish being fulfilled, looked troubled because of this sudden turn of events. He didn't dare to say it out loud, but it troubled him because it happened in front of a large group of people. Lucia and Theodore marched through the blocks dedicated to machines, tractors, livestock, boats, and fishing and knives, and even an auction for unused or otherwise outdated military equipment. Each one of them had their lights, but they didn't quite pique the couple's interest in the same way as the last ones did. Blocks dedicated to hunting and textile work. The one half the couple being the expert on the other. They had a lot more to say about it than to each other. In the hunting block, Theodore kept going about the mechanical details of each gun's manufacturers and which guns he had inherited from his family's past. Also, the thing which comforted him was that Lucia was indeed listening to him, and she had let go of his hand. The human mass was also a lot smaller this time. Despite his mouth kept running, Theodore still tried to take his friend into account and stop for a second if she was getting tired of it. Everything made by the metal of the estate is so much more technically wiser. They are all of small springs, and its safer is a lot more reliable, especially those that are bought through the west of Atlantic stand no chance against the local industry. Theodore kept going until he heard a man's voice behind him. So you, boy, are the gun enthusiast. Mind helping me a little with this problem here? Theodore turned around and he saw a tall, probably 25-year-old beardy adult. Theodore himself was already very tall, but this man who stood behind him was even bigger compared to him. This tall white gorilla also had a big and dark sunglasses which a stereotypical biker would use. Theodore then shifted his focus on the point of service that was behind him. It appeared to be a weaponsmith's hut, but it appears to be shut. Theodore then pushed this man aside and walked to the hut. So, I take it as the weaponsmith is not here, Theodore said. And at the same second he recognized the weapon of this man was speaking of. It was double-barreled 212 caliber metal of the estate model Savage. Theodore immediately remembers his first time with Simon trying to fix the Savage's Safer's function. It took weeks to fully realize what was wrong with the Safer and what it lacked. So, when you were speaking of the metal of the estate, do you happen to have knowledge how to fix this one? The big man asked from Theodore, and who looked more than excited. Soon after the question was asked, he gave a quick nod and picked up the gun. Theodore took the stocks off from it and the metals, started to reassemble the machinery. Lucia, who hadn't yet ever seen the gun's insides, was very surprised by the technicalities of the machinery and how detail-oriented it was. Theodore kept explaining about the pipe selectors, about the savers, and the position of the hammers that they were supposed to be. Because of Lucia's family's disinterest about hunting, she didn't even know the features of the shotgun had. She just remained silent, as Theodore and the other man kept chatting about the assembly, despite Lucia having an alienated feeling. She still was very happy to see the true Theodore, who didn't behave like a machine. Also, she got to see her friend in his own element. So when the saver's tip is behind the changer and not in front of it, it causes both of the barrels to get triggered. But now it should work as it should, Theodore told to the gun's owner, who then picked up and loaded it. You shouldn't use an empty gun, but this is an emergency, he said, and turned off the safer and tried the selector, which let out its usual clicking noise, and pulled the gun's trigger twice. Then the gun gave 2 clicks, and the owner shouted, "Yes!" He thanked Theodore and left the place. Lucia was surprised and started to show signs of uncomfortableness because of that oddly eerie person they just met. Theodore instead found him just as one of those little too eager hunters who only cared about the index finger's face. Also, there was something familiar about him. Despite him buying his services, the man's appearance, from his poorly cared beard and just overall lack of hygiene, made him feel like he came from a poor background. Much like Theodore did. Nevertheless, the two kept going, and now the last section of the hunting block awaited. Bows and arrows. It wasn't all that special for neither of two, so they were quick to move to the textile workshop block. The young couple was walking next to a sharpshooting game, which was orchestrated by the local bowmasters. In reality, they were just simple enthusiasts, but no one else was more skilled than them. 2 children were competing against each other, and it seemed the other had just won. He swinged one of the sharp arrows he still had in his left hand. The tip of the arrow just happened to rise in the same height as Theodore and Lucia's heads. Then it made a perfect cut over Theodore's right cheek. It was such a coincidence that it reopened the scar Theodore had on his cheek only 1 week ago. Theodore jumped at least an inch off the ground because of the surprise that came so suddenly. Theodore flinched out of his sheer shock and immediately put his hand on the cheek. One of the bowmasters came to relieve the situation and to sort out what even happened. Lucia tried to comfort her and calm Theodore, but he had other thoughts. What was that? What is it that you dare to swing sharp arrows around just like that? That is not how a human behaves, Theodore said to the boy. He tried to keep his voice in check, but he couldn't help it. His voice started to sound like he was about to give into a violent and bitter outburst. What enforced the man's anger was that everyone seemed to be on his side, but no one would have allowed this to happen because the child was obviously sorry and tired. Because the child was obviously sorry and tried through the sheer tension and fear apologized to Theodore. Unfortunately, Theodore didn't see it as that. He has never been apologized by his family about anything, and when no one was to speak for the boy's defense, that it was an accident, Theodore saw himself as the authority figure without limits. Theodore was about to grab the arrow from the boy's hands and shout to him again, but then he remembered what he shouted to the boy previously. Normal people wouldn't do that. Theodore collected himself and said, "Just promise. This ain't happening again. Then I'll forgive you." The boy nodded in tears to him, and so Theodore decided to move on. The bowmaster stayed with the boys and tried to comfort them after what happened. Lucia kept staring at Theodore's cheek and the man's way of living it. He didn't even bother to pay attention to it. He just kept going. "Are you sure that you aren't going to do anything to that? I might know something that will help." Theodore moved his head towards Lucia while still covering his scratch with his big hands. Lucia took Theodore's hand away from the scratch, and while she was doing that, she told, "At least this would cheer you up." Then she moved her head towards Theodore's scratch, and right when she had to put her mouth over Theodore's cheek, he let out a gasp and stepped away, while shouting in embarrassment, "We are in public!" Theodore felt exactly the same when Lucia pulled her with him before in the evening. Lucia looked like Theodore was kidding to her, because of the marketplace has already started to get less dense of humans at the point of silence. But when she further examined Theodore's face, she realized that Theodore indeed meant that. "Oh, forgive me if I were rude to you," Theodore cut Lucia saying in shame. "What if we get to the last block we haven't yet visited?" Lucia then nodded to this apology and suggestion, so they moved on and arrived to the block dedicated to handwork and textiles. This time Theodore would follow Lucia in her element. Lucia was lecturing about all the different strings, wools, knots, and knits. Theodore started to wonder, was this the feeling Lucia had while I was talking about the guns? Curiosity, much like physics. Lucia, much to Theodore's surprise, had a similar tone when she was talking about the industrialization. Lucia, much to Theodore, had a similar tone when she was talking about the industrialization of products. See the markings and forms over that one roll of these fabrics. They're all linear and simple. Mr. Spikes had taught us since her course began how I can surpass all the modern manufacturers in quality just by paying attention. I believe with that we can bring the past's hunt skills back to the present, don't you think? Theodore processed this question for a second, and was about to say something until the same man from the hunting block interrupted him. "Am I getting uncontrolled jealousy to your countryside, fellas? Especially compared to the excuse-me city I live in." The same beard tall man came to the spot, this time with an elderly lady with him. "We indeed agree with you, and we are just desperate as you trying to find a solution. Unfortunately, I and Grandma specifically can't find the space or labor for us. Neither out the poor city even tries to help with their ambitions. I am indeed surprised how you northern farmers have gotten such anti-slum here. Indeed surprising, but perhaps it explains your skills and knowledge." Theodore and Lucia weren't quite sure how to respond to this information, nor were they even sure what this man was talking about. They stood there for a while until the elderly lady opened her mouth. "He's talking about that our own home city that has failed its purpose, unlike Claw Lake. But both of these places share the same issues that you just talked about." Theodore started to get more and more curious about the situation of their home. Did Gustav mention that city already once? Then he decided to join to the conversation. Are you from the south? Was the city's name Upward? Both the man and the granny nodded, and this drove Theodore even further. Lucia, on the other hand, asked what specifically went wrong with Upward's building, because Claw Lake, in contrast, was such a successfully designed city. Why or what was the purpose of the city had failed? I don't quite get what might be wrong. The grandma started to tell the background of their situation and where the town had failed. The story of Upward began by its founder, Ernest Krulak, had planned the first building, a storage designed for rich man's belongings. Around this marble and stone monuments scattered factories, which were funded by him. Through time, the monument would be changed to a town hall, because the factories had pulled living around Mr. Krulak's land. Because of the town's low amount of education and Mr. Krulak's lack of interest, the city was growing with an uncontrollable acceleration, and no plans were made to make them actual apartments. This created a strong sense of segregation around the city, and despite the name Mr. Krulak have made to resemble Upward, the reality was pure downward spiral. No proper housing or the city's outer parts, imbalanced wages, and even open corruption started to tear people's faith in the ground. Because of all these internal problems, people are very cautious when using money if they have something to begin with. So we had to move our business to here, because we finally can at least get something sold. This answer gave the young couple even more questions to their minds, but because the evening was running late, and time returning to home with it, so they thanked the silk sellers they met, wished good an evening and the future, so they started to make their stroll towards home. Lucia, throughout their walk, couldn't help but tease Theodore a little bit about his sports and compare to hers. I weren't summoned prepared, or what? No need for any good for something like you. Well, you made yourself sound like hunt expert. Theodore didn't pay attention to it because Lucia was indeed correct about his preparation, and she didn't mean anything bad, so he just laughed along. The two walked past the sighing of Rind Lake, the village they lived in. Shortly after that, they made it to the Trevor's household. Lucia followed Theodore to the front door of his house. There Lucia was about to say her goodbyes until the boy, Theodore, dropped his clapper bag and leaned towards Lucia. Sorry again, if I were rude to you in the marketplace, but what I actually wanted to say, I don't think saying thanks is enough. How grateful I am for this day, Lucia. Theodore said and grabbed Lucia into his arms. He blew a kiss into the girl's lips and raised her off the ground. It took a while for Lucia to realize what was going on, but when she did, she joined to the expression of passion. Neither of them knew how long they were like that, but when Theodore let Lucia go of his arms, it felt like eternity had just ended. Theodore whispered to the girl's ears, "Thank you for all the support you've given, Lucia Dark." Lucia then raised her on her toes and kissed the scratch of Theodore's cheek. When she let go, she said back, "It was little, if your devotion to Father and his efforts are concerned. You have proven yourself to be worth of love, perhaps even way earlier than the day we met the first time. With our own cooperation, we might be able to bring this little village back to the map, including our families." Theodore nodded and put up a smile he had never shown before. It was so filled with happiness and confidence, something he had lacked ever since the day he was born. Days he can't remember. The couple's moment was interrupted when Evie suddenly opened the door to the Theodore's home. The elder said that she heard footsteps, but no one opened the door. When she saw Theodore and Lucia surprisingly close to each other, her jaw suddenly dropped. She tried to get words out of her mouth, but it was no use. Theodore then asked, was something wrong? To that, Evie finally managed to gather her head and said, "So you found yourself your life's pair, right? Hmm? Who are you, miss? I am Elvira Trevor."
So she walked towards Lucia for a handshake. Lucia happily took this handshake, and so it felt like two families had just made a pact with each other to pursue a greater future. Elvira, when she heard that the woman Theodore was infatuated was the village's richest man's daughter. This reveal severely shocked Evie's black and white worldview, and so her feeling of failure. Unexpected for certain. I wish we could speak for longer, but the evening is already turned into night. Or do you, Miss Dark, still wish to stay here? Elvira asked from the woman in front of her, and so Lucia replied to that. I agree. That night has already started. Shall we say our goodbyes now? Evie nodded and said to her owns. Theodore still stayed silent for a second, and before telling his goodbyes, he told Lucia the following. If Mr. Duck still remembers our phone call yesterday, tell him that my mother is the worthy witness I talked about. By the way, if you just happen to know, why has to find witnesses for his testament? Why is his labor force not an option? I believe it's that he doesn't want his subjects to know that his successor is still under 20 years old. Theodore, satisfied with the answer Lucia gave, stood still silently. So did Lucia. It took for a while until the two finally got their mouths open. Good night, love. Both of them said, and at the same time, an indescribable smile appeared on their faces. Lucia left the Trevor's household's front yard, and Theodore stepped inside to his house. This chain of events, from the 13th of November to the 12th of December, was to the past. Theodore's completely unthinkable. Theodore's work had been a change that truly worked into his favor. He had deepened his connection to his boss, and most importantly, he had found himself a loved one. No need to suppress emotions, no need to be ashamed, no purpose to be afraid of a longer future. It was pure line of solid gold, which illuminated these 2 weeks. A reason to keep going. Finally someone he could view as a partner and supporter. Lucia indeed felt the same. She finally found a man she felt like truly deserved someone into his life. A man who was being willing to go into the absolute furthest just to keep him and his family safe. Someone whose presence made her feel safe and who she knew could trust. This was the true miracle of early winter, which echoed far to the future and brought such a change in plans, with its own variety of choices to where to go next. Only time will decide where those choices will develop. The end.